Hi, this is Bob Santelli with What's Up on E Street, and I'm here with Max Weinberg, E Street Band drummer and television personality. And this is part of an ongoing series sponsored by the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music, in which we kind of weigh in with E Street Band members during this really interesting time in American history, this COVID crisis that we're experiencing. And we're just checking in to see what's going on with E Street Band members and how they're coping with the COVID epidemic and their personal lives as well as their creative lives. So Max, welcome. I know you're down there in Florida, and I got to ask you, how are you coping these past couple of months?
Well, thanks for calling in, Bob. It's always great to talk to you. I'm delighted to be doing this for the archives up there in New Jersey, where at the moment it's a lot safer than where I am in Florida. I live in Florida, as you know, and it's been, of course, as they say, unusual, unprecedented, and challenging times. I actually find it a lot like being on tour, believe it or not, with the E Street Band. And I'll tell you why I say that, because my day is so routine in terms of what I do every day, unlike what we call non-road civilian life. This is a lot like being on the road, where basically you do the same thing every day, pretty much, and it sort of rolls on. One day rolls into the next. It's very unusual to be in this sort of position and not be playing music 2-3 times a week, whatever it is. Although I must say that since 2017, I've done on my own about 230 something shows, which means that I've been consistently playing constantly since September of 1993. It's 27 years ago. So I've taken this opportunity enforced on all of us because there's no place to play. I haven't picked up a drum set or drumstick and played a drum set since, I'll tell you exactly when, March 7th in the Bahamas. And now so that's what, 4 months ago. It feels great to have stepped away momentarily from the drums and address other areas of my life that I'm, really interested in. You asked what I do on a daily basis. I'm really kind of a night person, not, I always say, well, I'm going to get up early today, but I never seem to get up that early. So a rising time for me in a completely darked out room, our bedroom, which is like being on tour. It's cold and dark in there because on tour, I need all the sleep I can get. It was 9:30 to 10 o'clock. And then right away, every day I go to my home gym and I do my 4 days a week. I work out with a trainer who only trains me, and we're both sequestered. So on the health front, that's good. So that's 4 days a week. And the other 3 days I do either treadmill or I have a bicycle. And that's without fail. Then I eat breakfast. And breakfast is always the same thing, just like on the road. It's either a big bowl of steel-cut oats with flaxseed, blueberries, and strawberries. I always have my one shot of espresso. Need that espresso, just one shot. That's all I need. And then generally, it's catching up on things around the house. I'm actually, most people might not know this, but I'm pretty handy. The one thing I don't do is electrical work. I don't do electric, I don't do plumbing, but I'm pretty good with a saw and I follow instructions. So little things around the house that I've wanted to do, like literally put up shelves or hooks or organize the sort of mudroom where our dog lives. It's called a honey-do list, honey do that, honey do this. And I've been doing that. I do that in the early afternoon. And then generally, we're now in summer down here in Florida. So it's like Northeast winters. So you stay inside as much as you can. Afternoons are devoted to reading. Becky and I both, we sit in our, we have a sort of a little home theater there. We don't turn on the TV and we read. So I've been reading. it's the most wonderful opportunity to read that generally I don't get when I'm either certainly when I'm playing with my own bands, like the jukebox, because it's a lot of traveling. There's no big crew or anything. When I'm on the E Street Band, there's a lot of free time. So, and I like reading books. I like actually holding a book. I don't use an electronic reader. And books are sort of my hobby. If I'm in, a town that's got, when I'm on the road, a town that's got great bookstores like Portland or San Francisco or London, wherever there's a great bookstore, that's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to hang out on the day off. So I've had the opportunity to just, to read, I like to read nonfiction history, and to just quote Bob Dylan, I've been spending a lot of time on the pavement thinking about the government in the last 4 months. As you know, Bob, my wife, Becky, is a political buff and a history teacher. And so this is something that's always been present in our household. My daughter, Allie, is a foreign affairs producer for PBS NewsHour. So there's always been discussions. And I think what set me off in my recent reading, which is in the afternoon from about 4 to 6 every day. And then at night, I read kind of lighthearted stuff, mostly architecture. But lately, what we've been doing, and Becky reads historical novels, and I have combined two things. My father, who was a lifelong devotee of Franklin D. Roosevelt. And when I was younger, I really missed the opportunity to ask him about those years. He was an attorney during the Depression. He was born in 1909, and he would tell me some stuff, but as a 15, 16-year-old, it didn't really sink in. But what I do remember is him always saying about Roosevelt, FDR, he saved the country. That was my father's line. And then back in the beginning of the government's non-response to this pandemic, I recall our president saying that he was now a wartime president. And those two items struck a chord with me. The fact that the leader of the free world said he was a wartime president, and FDR was clearly a wartime president, not only with World War II, but with everything that led up to World War II and his experience as a naval secretary and in and out of government. And I started and I never read anything about FDR. And really the only thing I knew was what everybody kind of knew, and I knew that I came from a very, I'd say, devoutly democratic, liberal home growing up. So I started reading. And the first thing I read was a book, I went on, frankly, I went online and I just looked up, okay, I was really interested in what the response was when FDR, okay, we have a pandemic, we have a crisis. What's the government response? What should it be? And what has happened in the past when you've had something like this affect the entire world? So I came across a book that was called, I have the name right on, Freedom's Forge. And there was a subtitle to it called the Arsenal for Democracy. And basically it was how in the mid-30s, Roosevelt realized that America was completely unprepared to get into World War II. We didn't have the armaments, we didn't have the materiel. We had 50 ships that were left over from World War I, and this was in 1936. So he called up, basically, it's a story of William Knudsen, who at the time was president of General Motors, I believe it was, who was a Norwegian immigrant, came here in 1902, who rose through the ranks at Ford and then General Motors. And he was known as a real sort of logistics problems guy. He was the guy who, when Henry Ford conceived of the idea of the production line, William Knudsen, Knudsen, was the guy who actually devised how it would work.
Mm.
So Roosevelt, he was a devout Republican, as most of the businessmen in the country were at the time. And there was a lot, as you know, a tremendous opposition to the New Deal, particularly from conservative quarters. So he enlisted. He said, Knudsen, I want you to come down to Washington, and I'm putting you in charge of what became the War Production Board to figure this out. The war with America hadn't started, and nobody wanted to go to war.
Yeah.
But Churchill in 1937 started really appealing and then begging Roosevelt to help them because the Nazis were coming, and they were coming through England, and there was nothing between Western England and Eastern United States except 3,000 miles of water, and German submarines were already there. So this was the ramp up and how America was faced with this crisis, and how the country, even though it was politically divided on staying out of the war, being involved in the war, these patriots who were Republicans, they were Democrats, ramped up. And in 1941, after Pearl Harbor, we got involved and we were ready. And as a matter of fact, we were ready to get in. We weren't ready to fight. It took another 2 or 3 years to really ramp up production. And it's a wonderful book, Freedom's Forge.
You have a second career as a history professor. That was amazing. That was amazing. You know, it's interesting because I'm listening to you. You're so passionate about the books you're reading, and judging from what's behind you, you have a bunch of books that you've read or plan to read. But one thing you didn't say in your daily routine was music. Are you listening to music? I mean, is that a part of your daily regimen? Listening to old classics, great drummers, new forms of sounds, contemporary sounds? Where does music play, or what does music play in your life these days?
Well, it's a wonderful memory. No, you know, I don't really participate in music on a daily basis. I really can't say that I follow. I mean, if I'm in my car, I will listen to satellite radio and I'll move around. And my presets are number one, Seriously Sinatra, Channel 71. I think everybody, I guess all cars, I don't know, cars come with satellite radio now. So I listen to a lot of Frank Sinatra. I do check in with the E Street channel because that's always fun. And sometimes I try to figure out, okay, is that me or is that my son Jay playing drums on some of the live shows? I listen to 50s, 60s. I listen to Little Steven's Underground Garage, deep tracks, outlaw country, listen to a lot of country if I'm in my car.
Yeah.
By myself. If I'm with other people in my car, I never listen to music. I can't tell you the last time I actually sat down and listened to music, just sort of, you know, as I did when I was a kid. I guess, not that I've outgrown it, I love it. And I love analyzing music. And most of my discussion about music these days centers around my wife Becky's participation in her blues band that she plays in locally. And they've actually figured out how to rehearse and play, mostly rehearse, while social distancing. One of the members has a big warehouse and they've set up these plexiglass baffles so they don't come in close contact. And she's super into it. So it's sort of like, I remember living with my son as a teenager, becoming a drummer. And now the discussions with Becky about being in a band, and she's also the lead singer in the band. She's very, very, very good. So I'm living vicariously through her musical experiences. And she plays a blues harp, and very good and getting better all the time. The one thing that was funny was that now she came back a few months ago from rehearsal and she said, now I really understand what you mean when you talk about your monitor mix. And only if you're actually playing would you understand. But really, on a daily basis, I'm not involved with music at all.
Don't you want to sit in?
No.
No,
I have
you don't miss the drums. You don't miss playing the drums.
Not at all. No. I love playing the drums.
Yeah.
And I've played, like I said, I've literally until March 7th played constantly for 27 years. apart from, even before that, but since
Yeah.
I got the job on television on NBC, I played every day, hours every day.
But
So,
don't you have to keep your chops up? I mean, if Bruce called and says, "Hey, we're going in the studio in 3 days," I mean, how are you ready to go?
I've been practicing for 60 years. Well, one thing that, that really does help me, if that was the case, um, uh, what happens as you get older as a musician, I've never been a musician who ever felt the sort of physical longing to play. When I met Bruce, I was on my way to law school, and I had played at that point for 17 years when I met him when I was 23. I played constantly, and it was sort of and we've talked about this, so what I spent so much time with the drums that I was really ready for like a normal kind of straight life and career. And then I met Bruce over the summer, and that changed everything, obviously. But I never thought as a young adult that what I dreamed of as a little kid, would actually happen for me, and it did. And now I'm almost 70, so I have spent more time on a drum seat than I have anywhere else in my life. So when I don't play, I mean, I wouldn't want to go for 5 years and not play. And I know drummers who have done that. 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months, I've done that before. And just, when I was on the lecture circuit and between tours with Bruce, I don't think I played at all. And I don't go to, places and sit in. And if you do that for 3 or 4 years, you're going to lose the synapses aren't going to work as quickly. So it's always good but I'm not at that point yet. And in fact, the one playing I did do, I should be with full disclosure, about 2 weeks ago, my son, Jay, came down from Nashville, drove down with his fiance, and he had done this incredible version of Candy's Room with heavy metal musicians. It was really very, very clever. And he produced the whole thing, and he played drums, and he arranged for me to get an electronic drum set, a new prototype electronic drum set. And I said, I've never had drums in my house, ever. I never played a drum set in my house. So I said, oh yeah, well, that would be interesting. I mean, who knows? So he came down, it was here, he set it up, because it would take me months to set it up. He set it up in about 3 hours. And he said, well, I did this Candy's Room. It would be great if you did like a song nobody would think of you doing. So I said, okay, pick one. So he picked a song by the Misfits for me to play. And I did, and it was a punk song. And we recorded the drums, he produced it. He had all the cameras, GoPro cameras. And, this was about 2.5 weeks ago. And it was the first time I played. So it was no strain, it was easy. And I wrote out a little chart, and he's going to give it to other, metal musicians who wouldn't normally play with me to do this. So he did a Bruce song, and I did like one of his favorite songs by, the Misfits. And so that was the last time I played, but I don't have that physical yearning. And my drumming, as I've talked about a lot throughout my career, has always been in service of some project, a singer, an instrumentalist. I don't have a home studio. I don't even have drums except these electronic drum set, which is fun. You put on the headphones and you can sound like you're in a stadium. So, I'll go over there and I'll just sit there for a couple minutes. And, the way I drum is pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple. And it's taken me 60 years to figure it out, but I've got it figured out. So I had 100 dates booked from March 31st to New Year's Eve with 3 of the bands I play with, not the E Street Band. And those all went away. I mean, from October on, they're still on the calendar, but until they really get a vaccine or a treatment, and with the ineptitude of the government response, which is what led me to begin reading. So I set aside this 2 hours a day when I can really concentrate on the subject material and use my highlighter and take notes, really educating myself of a period of American history that my parents grew up through, but I only heard secondhand. And so there's been plenty of books. It's not just that one book. I've been reading this fantastic book. Well, I started reading Waging Peace by Dwight D. Eisenhower, which was the second of his memoir books. And it's very, very dense. So at the same time, I said, okay, well, I can only read about 3 or 4 pages of that at a time. It's very well written, but it's very dense. So I got a book called The Age of Eisenhower, which is more like a trade paperback. It's about 600 pages, but it really covers the Eisenhower years. And I have the World War II reading. I've always had this fascination with the sort of, everybody thinks the 50s were so placid. They weren't placid at all. And it was the rise of the deep state with John Foster Dulles as Secretary of State and Allen Dulles, who created the modern CIA. So that whole period when we were little kids, I like Ike. I had a I like Ike button. I probably still have it somewhere. So I'm reading simultaneously about the Roosevelt years and the Eisenhower years from all different points of view. I've read almost all the literature virtually, and everything behind me. I've got about 3,000 hardcover books, and I've read them all. Some of them maybe twice. And they're all largely nonfiction, and it could be music and, going back to when I was a kid. So reading is sort of what I've been doing. I've been using this time as an opportunity to do short fundraising videos for down here for both food banks and musicians who are obviously out of work. They're little YouTube 20, 30-second things. And reading a lot. I'm the beneficiary of marrying, 40 some years ago, a woman who's an unbelievable cook. So I've been eating great, we don't go out, every night, I do the dishes, Becky does the cooking, and then there's a great series on TV, history lessons. So at the moment, we're making our way through, it's a 22-part series on the Great Plagues throughout history.
You're shaming me. I feel like I've been wasting my time all these months. I should have been self-educating myself to the point where you are. It's pretty incredible to listen to you and to know the knowledge that you've gained. I mean, Becky was a history major at Monmouth University. So was I. And you rank right up there with us. I mean, you could probably teach us a thing or two, which I appreciate. But I have one other question before we have to leave. And that is, we look at COVID, and obviously our world has changed. You've identified some of the issues that we're faced as a country. What do we face as a music industry? How has the music industry been touched? It's pretty obvious that it's at a standstill. But how do we come out of this? I mean, are you going to go back out on the road? Can we expect Springsteen to play live again? Can we expect anyone to play live? What, in your opinion, is going to be left after we finally conquer this COVID crisis?
Well, the COVID crisis has really put into stark relief the fragility of life. Also, how easy, generally, if you were born in the 50s and you're alive now, how generally easy we've had it when compared to some other generations. So the fragility of life is what's staring us in the face. And the music industry, which of course has been eroded over the strictly musical part of the music industry, which has been eroded since the invention of social media, inexorably eroded from when I first started making records back in the 60s, stopped dead in its tracks. The anemic response of the government, the Trump administration, to this pandemic, it's like they never saw the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951, with Klaatu. They never saw it. And it's amazing. So, you know, in Florida, we have a particular problem because of the reigning administration's tepid response to the seriousness of it. But you asked specifically about the music business. There is no music business at the moment. The music business for at least a dozen years has been focused on live performing and all ancillary modes of revenue producing events, whether it's merchandise, anything that has to do with a live performance. I do, with my jukebox and my rock and soul 12-piece soul Sly Stone sort of band, I do about a good 100, 110 shows a year when I'm not playing with the E Street Band, which has been, you know, what, 3 years since we played. That business is over. They've tried drive-in concerts, and the problem is economic. It's not so much, you can get a parking lot full of, you know, 500 cars. You could charge $10,000 a car, but you can't. So the economic model that applies to live music is punctured at the moment. I would recommend reading a book called Rockonomics by my dear friend, the late Alan Kruger, who was the head of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Obama. He was Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. He wrote a book that came out 2 years ago. He has since passed away, that details the music business as it was in 2018, the economics of it. So when you take the live equation out of it, until we as musicians can go back to playing live safely, and this has as much to do with insurance as it does with spreading a virus to each other. The idea of a rock concert or a classical concert or opera, it's a communal experience. You can't replicate playing live. You can't, you know, when Bruce said it best, he said, you're in concert. It's not that it's separate. The concert meaning both are working off each other, the audience and the performers. So until there's a vaccine or a definitive way to treat this as a cold, and I certainly hope the government gets into gear, and I certainly hope the government changes hands in November. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that Joe Biden wins this election. And whenever I do a public service announcement recently, I've always mentioned that, you know, whatever your political leanings, get out there and vote, even if you have to wait in line and social distance. I don't think music is coming back anytime soon. The holy grail of audio visual is to be able, and this is something that my son, for example, has been involved with for several months. The holy grail would be for me to play drums in my house with you in the Northwest and have there be virtually undetectable latency or delay. Until we have a way of defeating the laws of physics, which mandate that light travels at 186,000 miles per hour, that's never going to happen. It may happen if, you know, you're 5 minutes away, and, you know, you can see it on Zoom meetings. Zoom meetings, a good Zoom meeting has a delay, a latency of about 300-400 milliseconds. You'd have to get down to about 5 milliseconds of delay for a musician to convincingly play with another musician and not be disturbed by the delay. You're also subject to the, if you can believe it, the infant nature. And when I mean infant, I mean elementary nature of the internet as it exists now. Because the internet that we use on a daily basis is the weakest link in musicians isolating and creating. So that's not going to happen. So I believe that people will figure it out. Certainly singer-songwriters can do it, you know, pretty better than nothing. But people in my position where it's a community experience, I don't expect to be playing. I mean, I'm hopeful that my first date is October 5th, 2020. I'm hopeful that goes on as schedule. And as a matter of fact, I've told my agent and I told my manager, if it's going on, I'm going to be there. I had 5 dates coming up at the end of this month and beginning of August, which were in New York, Boston, and Chicago. And until last Friday, they were on. And then they shut it down again. So they closed the venues. So I'm ready, willing, and able. And, you know, you ask about my not playing and if I'm ready. So when in the space of a count off, 1, 2, 3, 4, by the time it gets to 3, I'm ready. And I just have, you know, the hope is as you get older, it's a little different than playing a horn where you got to really play every day. Even a guitar, you know, your fingers will get, drums, you can, even with a guitar, you can keep minimizing until you feel comfortable. But the whole idea is relaxation. It has nothing to do with strength, muscularity. What it has to do is with finesse, wisdom, and relaxation. And if you can do that, you know, you can take a couple months off and devote yourself to making lemonade out of these lemons we've been handing. So for me, my days roll into each other. I'm really nervous about the football season because that's our Saturday and Sunday activity. My wife and I is watching football all day Saturday and Sunday. I love it. And we watch all the games, and I don't think that's going to happen. So, you know, to me, this has been about, all right, it was shocking at first, then it was depressing, then it was sort of like the 7 stages of grief in terms of the pandemic, how you deal with it. And I'm at the point where, okay, I gotta, you know, I remember when drum machines first came out, there was a tremendous anxiety in the late 70s about drum machines, you know, evidenced by drummers. They were very, you know, they were being replaced by drum machines. So I said, oh, I gotta learn how to use drum machines. And I took lessons and I paid a guy to teach me how to work. And, you know, after about 6 months, I said, this is ridiculous. I can't stand doing this. This has nothing for me to do with music. You know, the way, what I want to do in music. And I've played a lot of music. And I said, so you know what? I'm going to leave the drum machine stuff to the computer guys, the programming guys. I'm going to release myself from that anxiety. And I'm just, you know, when I play drums, it's with 2 sticks on, you know, drum heads.
Right.
And I'm going to be able to give the leader and sometimes Bruce or myself what I need to do to perform in that instant, you know. And a lot of it, as I said, has to do with, you know, 50 years of making mistakes. And, you know, I've made so many mistakes in my life that, you know, the thing you learn as a drummer is if you make a mistake, you do it twice and they think you did it on purpose.
Well, look, I can speak on behalf of all the E Street Band fans out there, and I could say 2 things. One is it sounds like you're using your time to the greatest advantage, and you are indeed turning lemonade or going from lemons to lemonade. And second, that, you know, your realistic analysis of where we are with rock and roll and where we are with live performance, I think you're right. It hinges on that vaccine. I think it hinges on people's confidence to get out there without having the anxiety of thinking whether or not I'm going to get sick. But I think we'll get to that point, and that hopefully will lead to a tour. It's been 3 years since the E Street Band and Bruce have gone out on the road, as you say. And I know it's not happening anytime soon, but I think we keep the faith as fans that it will happen again. And then in between tours, like I said, you can teach at Harvard, American history.
Well, I won't replace any history teachers, but, you know, in that regard, I've been with Bruce, you know, off and on since 1974. So that's 46 years. And I've always said, when people ask me, particularly on stage, the one thing you can always be certain of is that you can never be sure what Bruce is going to do. You really got to pay attention. And now I've had 46 years of that experience. So a long time ago, I learned not to presuppose anything, go about my business, arrange my affairs in such a way that I limit the conflicts. It was a little, tricky when I was on TV, but, all my contracts with NBC had what was known as the Weinberg clause, which they actually used. I'll tell you this one short story that they actually used in negotiating with actors on television shows who wanted time off. And the Weinberg clause at NBC during the years I was active there, which was 93 to 2010, were, well, you can take the time off if Bruce Springsteen asks you to play drums for the E Street Band.
That's great.
I could name some names who that was spoken to, known as the Weinberg rule. But you at this age, closing in on 70, I'm ready if and when that call should ever come, and it comes suddenly. It's many layers of decision making above me as to whatever Bruce's plans are. He has always had so many different things he can do and does do. So I go about my business. In my contracts for my bands that I play with, my club dates and small theaters, there's what they call a force majeure clause, which all contracts have, an act of God. And it lists all those things. And it's a laundry list, including, terrorists and pandemics and, but mine at the end say any acts of God or Bruce Springsteen. So I'm covered every which way, from pandemics to earthquakes to floods to fire, including any act by God or Bruce Springsteen. And that's the way I like it. So, we're just, maintaining an even strain. And fortunately, I've been, married since 1981 to the love of my life, my best friend. So I have no problem spending all of my time just with Becky. So, life is good. And, I'll tell you one thing, though. I do sometimes late at night, after Becky goes to bed, I'll get on YouTube. And I've really discovered YouTube late. But I'll come across all sorts of videos, particularly great Beatles stuff, which is a lot of fun. And I really look at that stuff. And I'm talking 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. But I'll come across stuff that we did that I never saw. And it could have been in the studio, the Bruce and the E Street Band during, the years when it was, Clarence and Steve up front and Danny on the organ. And I look at that when we were children, right? I mean, I've never been that skinny again. And from concerts that, of course, I remember the show and playing, Louisville, never knowing that anybody may have filmed it on an 8mm camera. And here it is on YouTube. And, we were great. I mean, it was really, really great. And the one thing I've really noticed was no matter what size the stage, we were always huddled together in about 15 square, linear feet. We were very close together. Now when we play, in a concert, we're usually, 35 feet from Gary. And so we have our own built-in latency delay. It's a funny thing, but I do get a kick out of that, to see the old videos and amazing what you can find on YouTube. I don't know where people get it, but so generally I just encourage people to follow, the obvious guidelines. I mean, if you're, they opened the beaches down here, they closed them and then they opened them. Now they're open again. Wear your mask, social distance, wash your hands, take your shoes off. And when this virus, because there will be another virus. I mean, Bob, you and I lived through the polio of our youth. It took them 25 years to find a vaccine. We're much further along in terms of our medical research and the ability to do this stuff. But until the coronavirus becomes like a bad flu, you're going to see people, I'm not so sure, wanting to be just jammed up against each other in a concert. And I'm not so sure you're going to have tours at every level, people who make the decision to tour to put people in harm's way. And hopefully over the next year or so, people will figure out how to make music a communal experience again, because there's nothing, whether it's Broadway, opera, classical orchestras, rock, folk, country, you name it, there's nothing like being there. And for me, I mean, I still get a thrill when I go see Paul McCartney and I'm in a stadium, wherever I'm sitting, besides the fact that it sounds great, you know, you're looking at, there he is. There's that guy. He's live. I'm in the same room as Paul McCartney. You know, whether there's 70,000 other people with me, but I'm communicating in my own way with Paul McCartney. And, you know, I had the unique experience of watching my son play with the E Street Band in my place, which of course is bittersweet because you think you're invincible and irreplaceable until your son replaces you. So it's not bittersweet, it's a double-edged sword. You're happy for him, but what do you mean I can be replaced? Are you kidding? It's poetic. Replace me with my son. But, you know, and I'm out in the audience watching Bruce and the E Street Band play, which I think is a pretty unique position to be in if you're a member of the E Street Band. And I'm like, this is really freaking fantastic.
Do you remember, and in closing, you and I, when we did the Big Beat, and I'll never forget something that Ringo told us when we were interviewing him in London, or just outside of London. And I'll never forget this. I think you asked him what Beatlemania meant to him. And he thought about it for a second, and he said, well, there were only 4 people on the entire planet that didn't experience Beatlemania, and those were the 4 guys up on that stage. And, you know, you have experienced that by watching your son play and getting a sense of what we all believe in and find so amazing and creatively satisfying. But clearly there will be another time when the band gets out there. I'm convinced of it. And I think as a spokesman for the archives and for Springsteen, E Street Bands everywhere, we can't wait for that day. And in the meantime, I hope that you stay safe, give our best to Becky, and keep reading, because we'll tune in sometime else for another history lesson on American history. But don't forget to read about the history of rock and roll too, because I don't know any other musician, maybe Steve Van Zandt will give you a run for your money, who knows more about the history of rock and roll and can think seriously about its implications than you do. So I've learned a lot from you over the years as well.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to go on the record for the archives. I think it's an incredible endeavor. I can't wait to, you know, I've got a warehouse full of memorabilia that I'm, when you build your edifice, I'm ready to store it someplace other than my warehouse down here. And because I'm a pack rat, I've kept everything.
I know. I'll be there with the semi. Don't worry, we'll be.
Oh yeah. So, but you know, I do. Listen, I love rock and roll music, and I love the history of it, and I'm always finding out about it. The book I'm also reading at the moment is, and I think I may have mentioned it to you, this book somebody wrote on the Blonde on Blonde Dylan sessions, which is really interesting. And I'm reading it. I'm regretting that when we did the Big Beat in 80 and 81, that we didn't talk to Bobby Gregg and Kenny Buttrey, the incredible drummers that played with Bob Dylan, you know. And I never met Kenny Buttrey. He was 20 years old when he played on Blonde and Blonde. So, you know, there's more stories to tell, and I hope to be around to be able to tell them. Yeah. And there's more concerts to play, and I plan on being around to play them.
Well, with that well said, we will check in with you in the future, Max. Thanks for the opportunity for spending some time with you, and good luck, stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Bob. Same to you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.